Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's event. I am currently here with Sanjay Shukla, who is the CEO of Atyr Pharma. He's going to be telling us more about what their pharmaceutical company has been doing for sarcoidosis research. And if you have any questions, please wait till the end and we'll see if we can get to it. So, thank you, Sanjay, for joining me this evening.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. Very happy to be here.
Great. So, what can you tell us, like, if for those that don't know about Atyr Pharma, who is Atyr Pharma?
Sure. So, Atyr is a company that we're based in San Diego, California, and we have been. Our mission is really to develop medicines, in particular, focusing on rare diseases. The company was founded about more than 10 years ago, and its mission has really been around developing therapies from some technology that comes out of the Scripps Institute in La Jolla, an institute that is known for its research and its capabilities in really finding new areas of biology, learning about them. And our job at Atyr is really to translate some of those discoveries into medicines that we think can make a difference for patients. So the last several years, we've been really interested in interstitial lung disease, and in particular, sarcoidosis. So I've been with the company for about 5 years now, and ever since I've been at the company, we've been really focused on potentially creating a new therapy that we really are excited about for sarcoidosis.
Awesome. So, tell us more about you and your career.
Oh, sure. Happy to do so. I am a physician who has been in drug research for about 25 years. I'm originally from the East Coast in the Washington, D.C. area, where I grew up and I trained in medicine. Always been interested in rare disease drug development. It's a passion of mine to be able to create new therapies for patients who maybe lack good options. Maybe there are diseases where we need better therapies. So I have spent most of my career working in areas like lupus, myasthenia gravis, which is a rare neuromuscular disease, severe forms of asthma, cancer even. But the last 5 years, I've been learning quite a bit about sarcoidosis. One of my first experiences with sarcoidosis was as a medical student when I was at Howard University in Washington, D.C. I learned, like a lot of students, you learn about diseases when you treat certain patients. But I've always been really interested in seeing how we might be able to create better therapies, because I think we really need better therapies for sarcoidosis. So that's what got me interested in looking at this disease, and more importantly, looking for ways to get more visibility around not only the disease, as I've learned a lot about it because I'm not a pulmonologist, but working very closely with experts and patients to learn a lot. So I think that we try to do that at Atyr too. We try to be the type of company that has a lot of learning agility, tries to learn as much as we can from experts and patients, and try to apply those learnings real time into developing better medicines.
So, speaking of medicines, can you tell us about the Atyr 1923?
Sure. So 1923 is what our therapy is, and a lot of times you hear drug names as you get further along. They change into different names, but at this stage, it has a very sort of inelegant name, ATYR 1923. But this therapy has been in development for several years. This is a therapy that comes out of some of the technology that we have from the Scripps Institute. And essentially, it is a drug therapy that we think can control immune cells. As we all are aware, we know quite a bit about sarcoidosis, about what it does to our bodies, what the patient's bodies around inflammation and immune cells. So the drug works by modulating. It's an immunomodulator, modulating
Meaning,
immune cells that are activated. So we know, in particular, in the lungs of patients with sarcoidosis, inflammatory response is difficult to control, though we don't know the reason why, the causative agent, we don't know the cause, but we do know that it creates quite a bit of disturbance with immune cells, and that results in a lot of sarcoidosis patients having cough and shortness of breath, and then concern about progression of fibrosis. So this is a drug that we have observed in animal studies that really starts to downregulate immune cells, especially in the lungs. So that's where we got the idea that this could be really important and perhaps useful for sarcoidosis patients. From there, we've moved on into human trials, and now we have this phase 2 study.
so can you tell us how that's going?
The study is actually we've recently completed enrollment, so it's gone very well. We've been in this study for the last several years, and the study was really geared towards, it's a phase 2 study, so we have to ensure that the drug is safe. So the real primary objective is to make sure the drug is safe. But in addition, we've been looking to see if we have any signs of activity. So 37 patients were enrolled in this trial, and I'm really happy to report that enrollment completed not too long ago. And we are trying to get data from this trial, which I think will be really important for the medical and patient community later this year. The data is expected to be revealed in the third quarter of this year. So we're really excited now, completing the last few patients, and I can describe a little bit about the trial around how we designed it as well. I'm sure
Okay.
you want
Yeah.
that. So this was a trial where we basically targeted patients who have pulmonary sarcoidosis. We know that there's different manifestations, different organ systems, but we focused on pulmonary, at least for this first trial. We enrolled patients that had advanced to needing a day-to-day steroid to control their inflammation. And so we enrolled stably managed patients who require steroids with pulmonary sarcoidosis. And then what we really wanted to look at is, how did our drug, which is a drug that is administered once a month through a 1-hour IV infusion, how it does over 6 months. First of all, is it safe? Second of all, we have a unique component in our clinical trial where we are, in essence, trying to replace steroids or spare patients from steroids. So we have a protocol that tries to get people a little bit off steroids and seeing if we bring this drug on board, can we at least control symptoms? And then lastly, we hope and we think that by eliminating some steroids, some of that toxicity will also go away, and hopefully we don't see anything additional with our drug. So I think the idea here is, over 6 months, can we have a safer therapy? Can we have a better therapy than steroids? And can we actually see some improvement also, perhaps through pulmonary function testing, or even looking at lung scans, things like that?
So by the end of the third quarter this year, you hope to have results.
Correct. The results will be revealed. Right now this is a blinded study. So because we are also testing some patients get a placebo. Correct. So of these 37 patients, about a third of these patients are going to get placebo. So then we'll be able to tease out what our drug is doing compared to placebo. And that is, the results are expected, as I said, in the third quarter of this year, probably in that August, September timeframe.
Well, that'll be here before you know it. Yeah, Marcia says, "Yay!" So, say everything is great, and you're seeing that it's safe and effective. How soon? What's the possible time range that would be available to patients?
Yeah, so if we are successful with demonstrating that the drug is safe and we see signals of activity, we would move into what's hopefully what's called a registrational trial, a trial that verifies that we really have efficacy here and that we have positive outcomes for patients. That would be a larger trial, likely conducted not only here in the U.S. but also in Europe and even Japan. And that would be a trial that we would look to need to have probably, closer to 150, 200, maybe even 250 patients enrolled worldwide. We're going to negotiate that with the FDA and the worldwide regulators. But that would be a trial that would require us perhaps to look at our therapy over the course of maybe 9 to 12 months, because there's more numbers. It could take, a couple more years for this trial to enroll and read out. But we are trying to work as quickly as possible because we know we need better therapy for sarcoidosis patients. So the idea here is, hopefully we can have a therapy, in a few years. It might be closer to, 2025. I know that seems like a long time, but this is a process that, from companies compared, other biotech and pharmaceutical companies, we're the furthest along. So I will tell you that I think
Awesome.
we have the closest opportunity, I think, to getting a approved therapy, which would be the first for sarcoidosis. So we that's really our mission, and that's really our goal.
Yeah, Lynn says that would be amazing, and it truly was. 2025 is not far if you think about this disease was first diagnosed in the 1800s. So, like a few years from now sounds great. And like you were saying, another option besides steroids, you and FSR have an upcoming event on the subject of sarcoidosis and steroids, correct?
That's right. I work very closely, and I'm fortunate to have great support from the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Uh, they've been instrumental in helping us organize, plan for, strategize our trial, and having access to pulmonary experts from really around the world that I've learned so much, and my team has learned so much from to guide us here. Steroids, I think are, there's something that the public, the larger public, and maybe even some doctors, I mentioned to you earlier, we talked about this, don't really realize how bad they are. I even get, we're a public company. We have public investors. They ask me questions. Oh, steroids, don't they work pretty well? Aren't they cheap? It's not so bad, right? And I joke around. It's not really a joke, but to say, well, how about you and me take even 10 milligrams of steroids for a month? Tell me how you'll feel. Like, you'll feel horrible. And I think one of my goals here is to really highlight the burden that steroids create. I think some experts have described this as kind of like the devil's drug, like you're making
Pilled.
a
Tic Tac.
devil's bargain. Like, yeah, this helps me with my cough and shortness of breath, but I have to deal with weight
So
gain,
many.
insomnia, and fatigue, and I always like to, when people start to get into discussions around, well, it's cheap too. It's like we got to do better than that. I mean,
Yeah.
we have to have better therapies, and I've experienced the same sort of opinions, if you will, in other diseases like lupus. I heard this 15 years ago when I was working on a therapy for lupus nephritis, and there were no therapies for those patients either. And it was the same sort of thing. Well, we can use steroids, right? It's just fine. Well, then folks are needing hip replacements because they need steroid. They have to take steroids for years.
Yeah.
So this is a really important event for us to shine a light on. Okay, yes, steroids are used as a frontline therapy, but we got to do better, and to highlight the burden that steroids create for patients. with all the other things the bad things that they do.
So if you all want to check that out, I think FSR, when are they holding that event, Dr. Shula?
That event is next week. I believe it's we could look at their website. I should know this. It's on Tuesday or Wednesday. Yeah.
I have a link that I can put in the I'm going to put it in the conversation so you can sign up or tune in to that. That's if you want to watch the sarcoid and steroids thing that's happening next week. So at this time, we're a little bit above schedule. Yeah. Oh my gosh, Lynn has lupus and sarcoid. But if you have any questions for Sanjay, Dr. Sanjay Shula, just type them in and we'll see if we can answer, or he can answer them. Yeah.
Sure.
So,
And Sunday's fine. Yeah.
So this drug would be the first FDA, if everything goes well, you're the closest toward actually getting an FDA approved drug specifically for pulmonary sarcoidosis.
Yeah, and I mean, you might ask that question around, would this just be for pulmonary, and that's a question we get asked. Typically what you want to do, at least early on in a trial, is to sort of sub-segment populations within a disease. So I mentioned lupus, which is broad. We really looked at kidney when I worked at another organization. Sarcoidosis, as we're aware, primarily afflicts the lungs, but you can also have cardiac, neuro, other manifestations here. The FDA has never really approved a drug purely for sarcoidosis. Acthar gel is, of course, approved, but that's a drug from really the 1950s. So the idea here is we would, in our next trial, potentially enroll patients beyond pulmonary. But I do think that at least this trial, we're focusing on pulmonary. When you have drugs that are approved, there are things done in phase 4 where you then might start to look at, well, what are the specific, is this really useful in neuro or cardiac? Sometimes the FDA grants you a broad label as well. These are things that occur later on where they basically say, we're approving this for any kind of manifestation of sarcoidosis. But at this point, my hope is our drug can be useful for all forms of sarcoidosis.
That'd be great.
That would be an ideal situation.
So if in the future, when you all are doing another trial, how could patients be included in that trial?
Sure. So right now, we currently work with about 15 centers in the U.S. When you talk about a trial that might require hundreds of patients, obviously you really need to expand access because it's a rare condition where even 15 centers, you might struggle to enroll the trial. Now, it's dependent on how tight you keep the what's called the inclusion criteria. So we really specified pulmonary here. But let's say, for example, we allowed patients who had cardiac or neuro. Well, of course, you'd have a larger population of patients to pull from. If we were to sort of expand the criteria around steroid, like maybe in our trial, it was you had to have at least 10 milligrams or more. You could take it down to 5. Of course, you might, enroll more patients there too. But the important thing here is we want to also make sure that our drug is most effective in the most effective population, right? So there's milder forms of sarcoidosis, there are more severe forms. We think our drug really works well when you have a lot of inflammation. So perhaps if you, have a certain amount of inflammation, that's where our drug would work best. So in the next trial, if we are to advance and allowed to advance to the next trial, I would expect that we would have 20, maybe 25 centers in the US. It'd probably be a wider geographic distribution. We probably work with the same 15, 16 centers that have helped us thus far. But that would be something that we would look to start next year.
Mhm.
Assuming we have good dialogue with the FDA and advancement is in the cards for us.
So, while they're, excuse me, while they're participating in the trial, are they still taking their normal medications?
Yes. So, I mean, there's some exclusions. So, for example, drugs that might actually interfere or work similar to our drug,
Mhm.
you might want to exclude that, because then you're not sure if it's your drug or if some of those other drugs. So, for example, drugs like infliximab are sometimes used.
Like Remicade is infliximab.
Correct, like Remicade, and that also works as an anti-inflammatory.
Mhm.
So when you're in drug trials, sometimes you have to exclude things that work similarly. At the same time, other drugs like methotrexate, we're considering allowing that, because that works a little bit differently. Um, One thing that I think is something that I mentioned to you previously is I don't believe just one drug is curative. I think the first step is when you need better therapies. Clinicians, doctors, they need more things in their toolkit. And right now, one of my hopes here is that Atyr not only has a drug that can be part of the toolkit, but it also sparks other companies to get involved in sarcoidosis research and clinical trials. And I saw this happen in the lupus community, where I was involved in a company, one of the first companies to start a therapy for lupus. And it took a while, but 15 years later, just this year, the
Mhm.
first lupus nephritis drug was approved.
Oh,
Uh,
awesome.
it's 30 years too late in my mind. It took a long time, but part of this is getting the public more aware of the condition, the need for better therapies, and getting more people involved. So, if anything, one of the other sort of parts of our mission here at Atyr is, I would love for more companies. This isn't about a competition. It's about, let's
Mhm.
create better therapies, because a therapy that might work better for someone that has pulmonary might not work as well for someone that has cardiac or neuro. The reverse also might be true. So this is a real important facet of what we're trying to do. Also, working with the group like the FSR.
So, do you think the reason why more pharmaceutical companies are not investing in research for sarcoidosis is because the lack of awareness?
It's a big component. Yeah. Having come
Okay.
from, having spent time in my career at larger pharmaceutical companies, I've worked at, uh, bigger companies like Novartis, like Roche, Sharing Plow, places like that. Um, these are companies that obviously attack big disease populations. But now we've entered an era where some of the largest diseases like heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, we have a toolkit of drugs we can use there. As we
Mhm.
shift to rare disease, awareness becomes a big issue. So awareness is, in my mind, twofold. Number one, there is the basic sort of awareness of the disease and how the disease, what's the etiology, and sarcoidosis is still mysterious in that sense. What is the real
Mhm.
cause? What's really happening?
Mhm.
How do we basically stop that? So, from doctors need to learn a lot more about sarcoidosis, right? Because there's a lot of mystery there.
Mhm.
And I think that's where patients can also help, sort of, highlight what's occurring in the disease. Secondly, beyond research, awareness about the need for better therapies, that
Yeah.
these are the things that, I have a problem with. This is what I have to go through. And then being able to say, um, there should be investment here because we need a better drug. And I'll go back to this sort of concept of steroids where, cheap, readily available. It's, maybe sarcoidosis is not such a bad disease. I hate to say it, but
A
there's
lot of people
sometimes
think that.
a lot of people think that. And I
Mhm.
think that is where patient communities, the work that you're doing, the work like the FSR is doing, this is really, really important to drive. We're in a kind of social media world, right? Twitter, Facebook. It's about share of voice,
Yeah.
and I think the voice that a patient can provide here can even educate experts to say this is what's really needed here. So I'd like to get more of those other. Again, this isn't about competition. I'd like to get more of those companies involved. We need better understanding of the disease, the natural history, and we need better understanding about what the day-to-day impact is for patients. We know the things like worrying about fibrosis and lung transplant and those kinds of things. And there's a lot of health economic arguments on why do you want to wait for that, because that puts a burden on the system in other ways. But you're absolutely right here that awareness is a key component that we've just got to get better at.
So let's say you all enter the next phase and you're enlisting or enrolling people for the clinical trial. Will that be something that you share on your social media?
We like to be very transparent about the data, and I've also worked at other companies where maybe the data hasn't worked out as well in favor of the drug. The idea though is get the information out there because we can learn from it. In my mind, there's no failure here if you're learning, right? You can learn from any of the signals in the trial. So we will actually look to get this data out there publicly and talk about it, whether that's through social media channels. It'll be all channels, but when you think about it from a standpoint of a regulator, we have to prepare a package that they need to look through and give us an opinion on. So at this stage, first and foremost, the first thing they're going to check is a drug that you're developing safe thus far? Because that's the first thing that a group like the FDA looks at is safety. And then as you advance, they basically say, okay, it's safe. Now in the next trial, confirm it's safe again, but also now here's what we want to see for you to demonstrate that and prove that this drug is actually useful and what they call efficacious. So that would be the next steps, and then that would be shared also publicly around what does that trial look like, what is the enrollment, what are the criteria to be enrolled in that trial. Those are things that we would work on next year.
So let's say everything goes well and this drug hits the market. How much do you think this medication would cost?
That's a great question, and that's a smart question to ask because as we know, there's economic burden too that factors into healthcare. I don't think that's talked about enough, but beyond just, having therapies that are helpful or potentially curative, you don't want to replace that with economic burden then on patients. It's something that I think if the outcome of the trial and the outcomes are better, meaning if the drug really works and can benefit folks, then patients are more than willing and able, and insurance companies as well, because they're a big component here.
Yeah.
If we can really improve outcomes, if we could stop progression of fibrosis, for example, that's a huge, scary outcome for sarcoidosis patients, but also from the healthcare system, a lung transplant, things like that, astronomical costs to the system that trickles down to a patient. So right now you see therapies like the drugs used for IPF, which, are in the, it's $100,000, something of that nature for those drugs. That is obviously helping folks with IPF live longer. Drug pricing is a big thing that we pay attention to. Again, I can't right now tell you what a price might be.
Do you think it would be similar to the price of Remicade, since it's a similar type drug?
I think it can be. I think when you talk about immunomodulators, I'd have to go back and, some of this pricing also is dependent on what condition is being treated. So rheumatoid arthritis, like Remicade, when you talk about a more rare indication, sometimes it's not apples to apples.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, there's a complicated sort of algorithm that goes into all of this. What I like to think about is that if the drug is really, really benefiting patients in an important endpoint that is important to them, there are drugs that get created sometimes that change some kind of biomarker in your body. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it changes some cells. But how does it make it? Does it make you feel better? Does it improve your life? Does it allow you to have a better quality of life? Those are things that sometimes maybe some pharmaceutical companies don't think as much about. Yes, the drug got
Mm-hmm.
approved, but did it really help the patients? Our approach, at least at Atyr, is to really engage with patient communities and say, what's the most useful sort of things here that would make your life better? I personally think that if we have a drug that can perhaps spare people from steroids or maybe even get them off
That would be
steroids,
priceless right there.
I think then you could have uh, then all groups will be happy. We know we
Mm-hmm.
live in a world, in a society where investors and capitalism dominates, stuff like that. I mean, me more as a scientist, I want to make sure that we have a therapy that really, at the end of the day, I can talk to a patient, beyond a researcher and a doctor, and say, did this really help? Is it helping you? And it might not help all patients. It might just help maybe 30% of sarcoidosis patients. At least that's a start. That's what I talk about, the toolkit. That we have to start thinking of new drugs in that manner. But let's make sure that it's a meaningful patient outcome. It's a meaningful thing that's important to them, that really changes their life. That's what we're trying to do here is to create a life-changing type of therapy.
Awesome. So last chance, you guys. We're going to let the doctor go. If we don't have, if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the comments section. Again, I shared a link above. He's going to be speaking again next week with FSR, and there's a link where you can join the conversation and learn more about sarcoidosis and steroids. And let's see. And as always, check out Project Purple. Go to purpledocumentary.com if you want to learn more about our documentary. As the doctor stated, that awareness is key into getting the pharmaceutical companies to pay attention to our disease. And that would get us closer to finding a cure. So thank you for everyone who supports Project Purple Mission Sarcoidosis Awareness. And thank you for sharing your stories. And I will see you soon for our next event in 30 minutes. So take care. Have a great evening.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Okay, so we're off. We're not off yet.